Okay, we are live. Wonderful. Okay, so hello everyone. So today we are. Let me pass this around. Today we watched number 12. Looks just like you. And Pam, come and grab a seat. Teaching us the holiness of our bodies. Synopsis, which I guess I copied and pasted, which isn't exactly right. Anyway, the nice-looking mother, pretty friends, and handsome doctor of a plain girl wants her to have the cosmetic procedure that will make her look beautiful too, but the girl isn't sure that this will help her live a happier life. I don't know where I got the synopsis, but it's not right. The best friend does not convince her to have a procedure. They force her to have a procedure, and she comes out looking exactly like her best friend. They both look like doctors. Number 12, model. Our little factoid, the actresses who played the mom and the best friend were also the highest paid fashion models at the time. They were considered the epitome of beauty in the 1960s. So before we discuss Jewish views of the body and Jewish connections, first reactions to our episode today.
I think I said it. I don't know if you heard me. Some people said that was disgusting.
Say more.
Say more?
What do you mean?
Well, in that it included men as well as women, I had slightly less of a gag reaction, but it just, epitomized the messages that women have always been sent about appearance, and it's more important to be beautiful than smart, and all of those things. And I'll share some very personal family anecdote. When we were girls, I have a younger sister. She's 4 years younger, and she's certainly not unattractive by any stretch, but I was considered the pretty one, and she was the smart one. And our parents actually said that to us. And what that did was, I'm no fashion model, but I wasn't unattractive either, which I had no control over, but those were the genes. So what that did to us, I don't know what it did to my sister actually, but what it did to me was devalued my intelligence for years and years and years and years. I didn't think I was as smart as I came to understand that I am. And it was only later, I dropped out of college, that's another story, went back to school as an adult, got both my bachelor's and my master's. And it was only then in my adulthood that I came to really understand my intellectual ability, all because I've been told by my parents at a very formative age that I was the pretty one. And so that's kind of what that spoke to for me.
God bless Rod Serling for equalizing. He was always before his time.
Too.
Yeah, he was always before his time.
Less gender unequal,
right.
But
so it was across the board universalist. But yeah, certainly. Thank you.
But
we do. We live up to the expectations that are set for us.
Yeah. And that's who we think we are.
What we say to our kids, we don't realize.
Sure.
I'll say one last thing. I hate the word ugly. And they kept saying ugly, and that little girl teenager was very pretty. Yes. In my opinion.
Cute.
Yeah. And I hate the word ugly. Unattractive is fair. We shouldn't, but I hate the word ugly, and they kept using it. It was just like, oh.
I think it's supposed to be. You're supposed to have that reaction, of course.
Good for me.
Yeah.
What I think was wrong with the movie is the girl was attractive.
Yeah.
Right. Right. That's the message. Right. That's the idea. Right. We're supposed to feel these feelings. We're not supposed to buy into it. We're supposed to be bothered by it, which it seems we are. What else, friends?
I was a preemie. I was small. I should have stayed back in kindergarten, and it would have equalized some things. But I ended up being very challenged and I had a image of a little voice in the back of your head. I'm stupid. I have to study harder. I'm stupid. I have to study harder. And in college, I went through some counseling and discovered that this was a very destroying my self-esteem. And so this bothered me because and I'm sure people did not tell me I was stupid. I was just slow. Well, some people were saying fast, and some retain slower. I retain slower. I'm lucky my daughter retains very fast. But it really did affect me in my personality and the way I felt about myself. My whole childhood. I was the littlest. I was the littlest physically. There was, my sister was smarter. My brother was hyperactive. And I was small and the third and not smart. And what upset me is that I made National Honor Society. And my dad kept on saying, you made National Honor Society? You made National Honor Society? And I was just like, hello? He had tried to teach me some things when I had problem in high school, and he could not teach me. And so being the negative, it was just weird looking at this society, and it was wonderful and beautiful and everything was great and everybody had the same intelligence, and I thought, where's the uniqueness?
I think you hit on something there, Pam. I think we should remember it's not just that the bodies were similar. They were limited in their minds, right? And sort of 1984 Fahrenheit 451 situation, they banned books of expression that would challenge these things. So it was about and the mind is part of the body, so we should remember that. As we discussed last week, the Hebrew word for heart, lev, also means mind, and that they're connected in a way. So so that the mind is part of the body. So what I've given is a couple views, and I'm focusing today on mostly because it does focus on the mind, and we can get to that area, but the physical body and how Judaism, specifically Torah and commentators, seem to understand the body itself. And I think that's where it relates to what they call the transformation of this, that every body turns out a certain way, not the way that it was. So if you look into Leviticus, the priestly book, the priests had a lot to say about holiness and purity, and they were very binary people. Everything was sort of one way or the other. But the one mention that they have about the body, it comes from Leviticus 19:27. Traditionally, it's been interpreted to be the restriction against tattoos, but I think it's a little bit larger than that. But it says, you should not round off the side growth of your head or destroy the side growth of your beard. This is why our ultra-Orthodox friends have payas and beards. You shall not make gashes in your flesh for the dead or incise any marks on yourself. To give you a little historical background so you don't get sidetracked by that part, scholarship understands that this would differentiate you from an Israelite culture from the other cultures who had gashes and marks and paint and tattoos and bald heads and all kinds of things like that. In other words, it can be argued, a way for the priestly class to have the Israelites not conform to the other tribes around them. In the same way, there's arguments about kashrut in that way, that our dietary restrictions are meant to keep us in our tribe and not go out of our tribe. Because if we sit at somebody else's table, we might worship their god, we might marry their daughter, that sort of thing. So this was, and this was a very priestly idea, a very Levitical idea in terms of keeping things in an order. And I don't want to use the word conformity because every tribe was different. It's not like the entire world, but to keep the Israelites separate. Being separate means it was holiness in that way.
I see that, but then they're forced to conform within that tribe, right?
Yes, now that's true, and that's true. So remember that and if we expand that conversation, right, Jews by definition have certain rules that apply to us, right? And so there are conformity aspects to Judaism. Now, obviously, we have branched out, and so there are multiple denominations and those sort of things. But one could make, I think, a fine argument that certain ultra-Orthodox denominations do look very similar. They wear the same clothes. They have the same hairstyle. They wear the same, right? There is a bit of conformity there. To them, that conformity is holiness. That conformity keeps them separate from the other peoples of the world. If you conform to that, and we should know that if you leave that that denomination, right? If you cut your payas or whatever it is, they sit shiva for you, right? You're dead in their eyes, right? So there is a pull here of conformity that traces back to tribalism, to our tribe is going to be our tribe and your tribe is going to be your tribe, which means ours is not going to look like yours, right?
It's interesting. It's not absolute because they did have circumcision, which mutilated, in a sense, mutilated the body because it was thought it was a covenant. And the Greeks thought you couldn't be a member of Olympics if you were mutilated.
Right.
And so the Greeks, they had the same feeling about that as the Jews had about tattoos.
Yes, they did. No, it's certainly not only to Jews. Absolutely. An interesting tidbit for you is that during that time, during the Hellenistic time, Jews went under procedures to uncircumcise themselves so that they could participate in the Olympics.
Never mind.
So, yeah, so
And
so
yet,
that's fine.
And yet you go to Israel, and we were Teresa and I were there. I forget what holiday it was, but they dance at night, and it's to celebrate one of the generals or in any case, we went to the wall, and the men could dance and sing, but they had different shivas doing different songs and dances kind of around this fire. And the part, here's the wall, and the definition of where men and women were. And I wanted to dance. And none of the women were dancing. None
Right,
of the
they're not
women
allowed
were
to,
doing anything. And I felt very alienated. And Teresa at that point was indoctrinated into this a school she had been going to, and she was like, "Of course not. The women don't dance."
Right, and that's part of that aspect of that conformity, right? But one thing that differs from the perspective that we got here in the Twilight Zone is we don't know how far this extends, right? This society, right? Is it the world? Is it a country? Is it right? We don't know. We live in a world now where we can look into conformity and say, that bothers me, right? And then people look out and say, no, there's nothing wrong with it, right? I mean, I have tons of arguments with ultra-Orthodox about certain things which seem archaic and misogynistic or problematic, and they disagree. So we have a unique ability to look into different tribes and different denominations and different things to say this, say that's different. I mean, forget Judaism. If we look at Amish or Mennonite or whatever it is, right? There are different what we would call self-isolation groups that wish to conform to themselves and leave out the rest. We don't know if that's what happened with number 12 looks just like you, if that's what it is, but we see that in Judaism. So what I'd like to do then is move on to keep that in mind, that commandment has a little bit deeper than just what people say, don't get tattoos. But
I just ask you one little
Yeah,
minor question, but when they say you shall not make gashes in your flesh for the dead, would people mark themselves when someone died? Is that what they,
no, not really. Gashes in your flesh would last until death, basically. Permanent marks.
So you died. Okay.
Permanent marks.
Okay,
Right, exactly. And now we see that permanent marks like that bar you from certain cemeteries and that sort of thing. So the Maimonides in the Mishnah Torah, Maimonides lived in Muslim Spain in the 10th century, and he was a doctor, but also a great commentator, and he wrote what's called the Mishnah Torah, which is sort of some commentary on the Torah. And he says, every Jew is obligated to learn Torah, whether he is poor or rich, whether he has a full and healthy body, or whether he is a person who is suffering, whether he is young, whether he's very old and his strength is weak, even if he is a poor man who supports himself from charity and knocks on each door, even if he is a husband of a wife and children, he is obligated to have set time to learn Torah both during the day and during the night. As is written, you shall think about it day and night. So let's stop there for a second. So Maimonides is equalizing at a certain point, at least one aspect, the study of Torah. And the reason why I brought this in is because, and I mentioned, is that a full and healthy body can mean lots of things, right? And a person who's suffering can mean lots of things. But what he attempts to do, young or old, right? Apparently people are eternal in this Twilight Zone, and you get married 11 times. But whether you're single, whether you have children, whether you're strong, whether you're weak, poor, or rich, it doesn't matter. What Maimonides is saying is that this aspect of Judaism, of study of Torah, is the great equalizer, is what equalizes us all. What do we think, friends? And you can, I mean, the day and night thing is whatever, no big deal. But what, you know, yeah.
So you want us to comment?
Comment. What do you think?
That Torah is the equalizer of all. Is that
I'm asking you to comment on Maimonides' view,
okay?
not in modern days, on his view.
Well, I think it was an obligation.
Mhm.
Yeah, to me, it says like there's no excuses.
No excuses. Oh, okay.
Yeah,
So that
that's
turns it
not-
around interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think it's idealistic even in that day.
Most of our commentators, writers are idealistic.
Yeah, I mean it wasn't
Even the Torah. Yeah.
I
Well-
think it would, I'm sorry, go ahead.
The message is there for everyone. That,
Right.
It doesn't matter what you look like.
Right.
You're all Jews, and we all learn the Torah, and we're all the same.
Right.
There's equality amongst you.
Right. Right. And I think that if we think about it that way, you know, whoever comes to the study house, right, it's not anyone who looks a certain way or acts a certain way or comes from a certain background. So within the ideas of what we were talking about before, Joyce, in terms of inner conformity, Maimonides is sort of breaking that up a little bit and saying each of us have differences as we come and approach the Torah. The equalizer moment is that we all study the Torah, right? You know, I'm not sure how Maimonides would view you know, the Haredim or the Hasidic who all come in wearing the same clothes. I don't know how he would feel about that. But his view seems to be that it is not what we appear to be. It is what we are obligated to do, as you said, Jules, right? That the obligation to study Torah transcends the other sort of more, I guess, tangible aspects of who we are. Mary?
I was just going to say, I think also in terms of being an equalizer, you know, when you're all obligated to study the Torah, somebody could come from a very poor background, be very poor, but maybe
Right.
they're really a terrific
Right?
Torah scholar. And so,
Right.
and somebody who's rich is, to make the extreme case, might not be. And so
Right.
it kind of puts everybody on the same playing field. Somebody who's poor still could get a lot of respect for something that's very much revered. And, you know, not that the other person would be shunned, but
Right.
you know, they would give respect to this person.
Is that how
Right.
it really worked? I mean, is that how it really played out in Maimonides?
We don't know. We only
I
have
doubt it.
what's written, right?
Yeah, I doubt it.
But the idea then is is that there is no prejudgment, right? There is no you know, bars at the door, no velvet curtain, right? For Jews, right? Our obligations are our obligations, and whatever you are born as, or whatever you have gone through, or the choices you have made in your life that may affect you physically or mentally or spiritually or whatever it is, everyone arrives and is obligated, or at least strongly encouraged, to study Torah. So that takes the focus, I think, away from the physical self that I think Maimonides, you know, is hitting on. If we turn the page, At the top, so I'll do this one here. Let's see. Since a healthy and whole body is necessary for the ways of God, for it is impossible to imply or know anything of godly wisdom when one is sick. Therefore, one must distance himself from things that are damaging to the body and to accustom oneself to things that are strengthened and make one healthy. They are as follows. A person should only eat when he is hungry and drink when he is thirsty and not delay his orifices even for a second. That means bathroom, by the way. So this is something else. This is something else that is written by Maimonides, which says something totally different, which our commentators are wonderful about. So what is this saying?
It's saying you're sick, you don't have to. So you've got to keep so really it's saying that every Jew is obligated to learn Torah except those that are sick.
Right. I think you're right. I think it's not, you don't have to, right? It says you can't, right? It's impossible to imply or know anything godly wisdom when you're sick. Now, I think he's talking about like having the flu. I think he's not talking about, other things, but which I think it is hard to study Torah when you have the flu. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, we only have the words on the page. What else do we think?
I think it also says, okay, I use the word obligated. I was trying to think what word I wanted to use. Obligated to take care of our bodies.
Yes.
To feed them, but only when they need to be fed. To hydrate them, to eliminate properly, that we need to take care of our bodies.
Right. So very nice. That last sentence there, a person should only eat when they're hungry, right? We shouldn't overeat. We shouldn't stress eat. We shouldn't do these other things, right? Drink when you're thirsty, right? Don't overdrink or whatever it is. And don't stop your body from working. We'll get into that in a moment in terms of taking care of your body in liturgical and other things.
The phrase "our body is a temple," is that a Jewish phrase?
It's a Christian thing, actually. Yeah, that's a Christian phrase.
Use it all the time.
Yeah, yeah,
Body is a temple.
yeah. Ironically, it's a Christian thing. It's nice though, and when people talk about you're not supposed to have tattoos, when Christians say that. I always say, I thought your body was a temple. You can put up whatever pictures you want. So yes, I think what Maimonides as a doctor, and he was a doctor, a physical doctor as well, a medical doctor, is saying that there is a benefit to keeping yourself healthy, which allows you to go to Torah study, right? And be with everybody else, right? And if you don't take care of your body, you miss out on what he calls the ways of God, right? This the obligations that we have. Now, if we deconstruct that a little bit and modernize it, I think we could argue that Maimonides is saying that if we don't take care of our bodies, we do miss out on things in life, obligations that we have in life, and not necessarily Torah, right? So if we don't eat enough, if we eat too much, if we don't take care of what God has given us, then there are ramifications. We're not able to do some of the things in life that we're supposed to do. I think that's
He
fair.
was a doctor. Maybe looking for,
He wants more patience, yeah. Maybe so.
Well, your comment about someone had the flu or something
Right.
acutely ill makes sense to me, because when I was reading it, I was thinking, well, geez, some of the people I know do their deepest thinking or their most spiritual when they're facing death. And
Oh, sure.
have,
Yeah, I don't think he means
Yeah.
deathly ill. I don't think he means
Yeah.
terminal. I think he means feeling down,
Yeah.
having a cold. Yeah, something like that. Yeah, I think you're right. And I think it's not such a move away from what he was saying before, because he says those who are strength or weak or whatever it is, they can do Torah too, right? So I guess he is drawing the line at if you're really sick, don't come to Torah study and get everyone else sick.
That's right.
Right. Another thought on this was Isaiah Halevi Horowitz, and he's talking about Genesis and that Torah portion, the discussion of the creation of God, the matters that help perfect one's body. The body is viewed as the sheath of the soul, he says. and has also been created in the image of God. That's from Genesis 1:27. And he says that's why if someone kills another creature created in God's image, he himself will be killed in appropriate act of retribution. By his deed, he has separated a soul from its body, a sheath. Hence, his own soul will be separated from its body. There are texts that come on this, the eye for an eye and all those sort of wonderful things. Aside from those, what we would say legality issues, from a body-soul point of view, what can we read into this? What can we see from this that would help our discussion?
It's respecting not only your own body, but someone else's.
Okay, good.
I'm curious, is this the concept of a soul, is that a Jewish thing too? And
Yes.
Christians are big in souls.
They got it from us. Yeah. Yes. So yes.
St. Augustine said that baby isn't a person till the soul enters.
Yeah, there's reasons
So
that he
there's
said
a
that.
separate between
Yeah.
others.
No, the concept of the soul is different depending on which particular era you're in Judaism. But yes,
Okay.
the idea of the ruach or the neshama, there are ideas of something that is not physical, and depending on which philosophy you look to. But yes, so that idea is, and we can see this in Horowitz's idea that that certain commentators believed it to be a separation, that when a body is killed, the soul departs. That's a very particular Jewish view. Some don't understand that to be that way. Other people have less of a like distinct connection between body and soul, and also where it goes. Who knows? There's all kinds of stuff like that. But the idea of again, in terms of equality, right, is that another creature created in God's image, right? That is the baseline in which many commentators take this, and that there is something, the great equalizer isn't Torah. The great equalizer is that all of us have been created in the image of the divine, and the ramifications of what that can mean. Thoughts, friends?
Okay, so if the soul, okay, I'll just cover my own perspective. The soul is actually the essence of one who is.
No.
It's my turn, Jules. You can have yours in a minute. If the soul is the essence of who one is, and okay, we're probably mixing words, character, personality, soul. They're not quite the same, but I don't think all. I'm gonna have to just say it. I don't think all souls are equal, because we know that there are people who are evil-minded, who have evil instinct. There's the Yetzer Tova, the Yetzer Hara, and I think that some people have evil souls, and they demonstrate that, and some people have kinder, more generous, more loving souls, and they demonstrate that. So maybe I'm not following what you're trying to get at.
No, it's fine.
But I don't think that.
It's fine to share your own perspectives. I
You
think
know,
that's fine.
We're all created in God's image. Well, that's where free will maybe comes in. I don't know. Maybe we're all created in God's image, but not everyone with their free will evolves or lives in God's image.
Well, I want to challenge you on that, Beth, because you had mentioned things like the Yetzer Tov and Yetzer Hara.
Right.
Yetzer Tov and Yetzer Hara are good inclinations and evil inclinations,
Right.
which means in Jewish thought, we are born with both,
Right.
equally made in the image of God with both.
Okay.
What we choose to do them, I
Okay.
think, is really where you're going, Beth.
Well,
And I
say
think
free
that
will. Yeah.
I think that instead of saying, well, at least in Jewish thought, I mean, I don't want to push against your thought, but in Jewish thought, the idea that no one is born with an evil soul, rather they embrace the Yetzer Hara,
No,
the
you're right.
evil inclination. Well, I'm not right or
No,
wrong.
no,
I just want to challenge you on that, to say that there is something in terms of what you're saying, free will, that occurs after we have our choices that we make, right? And so you're right. That changes the equality of who we are. What Judaism and the philosophers say is that if you go even before that, right? the template that we're given, the base model that we're provided with, is a divine spark, a divine image, and we have potential to be good or evil.
I agree with that.
Okay, good.
That's-
Okay.
I agree with that. So I didn't phrase it as well as.
Perfect.
I
Okay.
and
That's great. I'm glad we
nice.
clarified. Wonderful.
Just
Okay.
like to say,
Yeah.
a personal contrary view. of
Yeah.
this thing.
Yeah,
I think
that's fine.
I think I'm non-religious, so I
Right.
think a soul was invented.
Right.
Invented this concept. In other words, God, we're made in the image of God, or we invented that.
Right.
So for me, there's no such thing as a soul.
That's fine. You can turn it around. That's perfectly fine. We're always able to be able to say, this understanding of humanity came from an idea of humanity for a purpose. That's perfectly fine from a scholarly point of view. What we can then do, Jules, is say, well, then why did the authors wish to convey this, right, at the time? Who was it for and what was the purpose, right? We can disagree with it, right?
Yeah.
But we're not the audience. Their audience is meant to read and say, okay, we're all made in the divine image. Okay, well, what does that mean? They're meant to buy into that. Some did, some didn't, right?
My answer to that
Yes.
is the purpose of religion is to explain what nobody can know, what happens
Sure.
after death. And
Sure.
so this was a construct to explain this. And so it worked very well. It may not be true, but it works. You know.
Yeah, religion's quite successful. Yeah. Yeah, it certainly works. I can't argue with that. Yeah, I think that there is that something that perpetuates through Jewish thought is this idea of the divine image, right? It's why murder is not allowed. It's why Lashon Hara, gossip, is not allowed, right? Everyone deserves a common denominator of respect because they are made in the same image that we are made, right? Now, we don't all look alike, like in this, right? Right? We don't look like number 12 or whatever it is,
We don't all think alike.
but correct. So then the goal of Judaism and this idea, this exploration of, is if we don't all look alike, we don't all think alike, what is the divine denominator? And I think what they're trying to say is that we were all created in somehow there is something inside us. The Kabbalists would say the sparks of the divine are inside us, right? But then we become very different, right, in our way. But that is a concept that goes against sort of the more on the surface idea of our Twilight Zone episode, right? Is that it allows for free will and expression and looking different and all that sort of things, right? But there is that denominator of respect. Go ahead.
Yes, and the reality is we don't embrace difference very well. As humans.
No, we're not good at it. Yeah.
We don't embrace it very well, and the other, we're not comfortable with it.
Right.
Different is uncomfortable.
Right.
In many cases, and I'm just going to be you could be the non-religious and I'll be the realistic person here. The reality is, because I'm not going to hold myself above, having said what I said at the beginning about the messages I got, we are a very appearance-oriented, visually oriented culture. People, it's not just the culture, because it's all
Sure,
over the world,
sure.
every culture.
Sure.
We have standards of beauty, we have standards of attractiveness, we have standards of acceptability, and I think most of us, to some degree, whether we want to admit it or not, buy into that.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Well, I think we all compare ourselves to other people.
Yeah. Whether it's physically, economically, intellectually, professionally, successfully, yes.
And we can change. The difference in what you experience in youth can definitely steer you in other directions, and then you grow independent, you become an adult, and at some point, if you're lucky, you evaluate what influences or what things you do, what is the good and what is the not so good, and you try to improve yourself. And I very much have that situation in the case of my daughter, and her ability or inability to accept me as I am or accept her past in reality. And it's a human factor of when I see her, when I talk to her, or what I do for her. Sometimes there's appreciation and sometimes there's not. That's part of being human and the growth of the human mind, body, and soul. Because she was obviously born like every other baby is born, innocent and beautiful and needy, and things in her life influence what evolves from that.
So there's certainly the outside factors that do steer us in certain directions. The other episode that we watched, I think it was one of our first, was called The Eye of the Beholder, right? And Rod turned attractive and unattractive, right? Everyone had sort of big pig faces, and people who were born that looked different, I don't want to say normal, right? Different, were the ones who needed plastic surgery and were banned and that sort of stuff. So we cannot ignore societal pressures that steer us in this way. Now remember that the Torah and Judaism is meant to be one of those societal pressures, right? Judaism is supposed to teach you to live in a certain way and think a certain way. We're not supposed to covet our neighbor's stuff. We're not supposed to, there's all these commandments, 613 of them, to follow a certain way, right? Whether it's idealistic or not depends who you ask. But each religion, each tribe has its own societal pressure to say, and even, Judaism even talks about, Pam, to what you were talking about. It talks about wisdom and it talks about change and those sort of things. All of that goes in there. I want to keep going so that we can respect one another's time. Taking care of your body. Deuteronomy 4:9-10 says, guard yourself and guard your soul very carefully. A particular commentator says, the classic commentator Kli Yakar explains, guard yourself means taking care of your body. Bodily health, he says, is the foundation for keeping all the commandments of the Torah, since in most cases they are bound up with physical action of some kind. When the body is unfit and unhealthy, this detracts from proper fulfillment of the commandments. So that's more of what Maimonides was saying, is that in order to fulfill your duties as a person and your obligations, stay healthy, right? In the words of the Rambam, bodily health and well-being are part of the path for God. It is impossible to understand, etc. We read this whole thing, right? Cultivate healthy habits is what he says, and then it goes on. I think because of time, let's switch over to the next page, and I want to talk about this prayer. Because this is a prayer that we say in the morning. Several times every day, we have the opportunity to express our gratitude to God for the wonderful workings of our body when we say the blessing Asher Yetzar. It is traditionally said after using the bathroom. Asher Yetzar is a blessing that our sages instituted over the wisdom and design of humanity's body and the wonders of its functioning. After relieving ourselves, cleaning our bodies, or washing our hands, we pause for a moment from all our activities and focus exclusively on saying the blessing, reflecting on God's wonders and expressing our gratitude for them. A number of sources mention that recital of the blessing of Asher Yetzar with attention to its meaning is itself conducive to good health. When a person is aware of and appreciates the kindness someone does to him, the benefactor is happy to shower him with even more kindness. How much more so will God, whose goodness is unending, increase God's goodness and kindness to us if we truly appreciate them. That last paragraph before we read this prayer together is really what I want to focus on, because now we know about psychological things and we know about philosophies and good vibes and all these sort of things. So saying the blessing, right, the blessing of Asher Yetzar, which we'll read in a moment, the commentators, Kli Yakar is saying that in itself makes us good health, feel good health. Now, the reason I don't necessarily agree with, but if we stick with that on a more general level, convincing ourselves of being grateful that our body works can be healthy, Judaism says. When a person is aware of and appreciates the kindness that someone does to them, if we do kindness to ourselves, we appreciate our bodies and ourselves and the working. Now, if you are super spiritual, you can attribute that to God, and you can be very grateful to God or yourself. Either way, this is a form of self-care that allows you to think that way. Would someone like to read this in the box, the English on the left side of the box, the Basher Yatzar, so we can give you the blessing?
Sure.
Okay, Pam.
Blessed are you, Adonai, our God, King of the universe, who formed man with wisdom and created within him many openings and many hollow spaces. It is obvious and known before your seat of honor that if every one of them would be opened,
Even one.
Even one of them, if even one of
even
them.
one of them would be opened, or if even one of them would be sealed, it would be impossible to survive and to stand before you even for 1 hour. Blessed are you, Adonai, who heals all flesh and acts wondrously.
In other words, if the body didn't work the way it was supposed to work, if our veins and our hearts and our aspects of the human body didn't open and close the right way, the blessing is we wouldn't be able to even worship God, right? So, hey, that's awesome that we can do that. But if we talk more about what we were saying before, and what Maimonides was saying, is that there's more than just that, right? We are grateful for our bodies working, not just so that we can worship God, because there's things we need to do, right? There's things that we've got to do. Now take that and the paragraph before it, and what do you guys think of, we do say it here in the mornings on Shabbat services as part of the morning liturgy that we do in a more general sense. It's up to individuals if they wish to say it when they're washing their hands or they're using the restroom, but it is part of the liturgy of a Shabbat morning service, part of the morning blessings of taking stock of our soul, our body, all these other things before we go and pray. Thoughts? Yeah,
Just
Jules.
a question.
Yeah, please.
Do Hasidim and Orthodox Jews, do they exercise to take care of their body? Or is that not something?
I have no idea. I assume so. I mean, they walk to Shabbos, right? Okay. But I assume there is exercise that they do. There's no reason why they wouldn't. In fact, I do know when I was in St. Thomas, the Chabad rabbi wanted to work out, but the problem is you can't work out in a gender, and you can't show your shorts and stuff like that. So they need to do it privately with a.
But he did work out.
But he did, and he had a whatever you call it, a private trainer. Yeah, he had a trainer because he couldn't show his ankles or whatever. So, right. So God forbid. So, but yes, they do. They do take care of themselves, and they do exercise. Yes. So, thoughts on Asher Yatzar to our discussion.
Well, it occurred to me is that anything you can do to express gratitude is going to keep you healthier. If you, there's all these things that you read about. If you just, if you list every night before you go to bed 10 things you're grateful for, or, just to have a grateful attitude keeps you healthier, happier. I don't know if it fits in with what we're talking about.
I think it does just fine, Joyce. I think when we talk about, and this is what we're moving away from this sort of surface level. I mean, that's Rod Serling he goes very, very far on this. This is a very, very far extension of, you lose your individuality, and it's all about a surface idea of who you are, and you're not right. But I think if we take it to a more realistic sort of platform, self-care comes in the form of gratefulness and the ideas of what make us unique, but also what can help us to work for things in this world. So that I think is a great thing to say. Yeah. What else?
We in a secular perspective, in a 2020 perspective, we do know much more about the mind-body connection.
Yeah.
And then if we don't have a healthy, peaceful mind, we're not going to have a healthy body. How you feel mentally, emotionally, really does affect your whole well-being. And so gratitude, I go to all those websites, tours, all these things, and the attitude of gratitude and all of that. And I mean, I happen to subscribe to it. I believe it's true, but I think being grateful makes you a calmer, more focused person. I think gives you better coping skills.
Yeah.
Well, the other thing too, I think, is that we take normalcy for granted
Mm.
in our lives, and it's until something becomes abnormal that you really appreciate normalcy.
Yeah.
That's
You
true.
know, we don't appreciate it till we lose it.
Right. And I think normalcy is subjective in itself, right? We decide what. I mean, there are certain things in terms of the body working that is normalized. I understand what you mean. And there's normal psychology and abnormal psychology, but I think that we try very hard not to use normal outside of the medical realm, because when we do, we can start those judgments of they don't look normal or they're not like me. And I think that was mentioned in the beginning, right? Which goes back to our episode, right? Is that according to the society in the Twilight Zone, this girl was not normal, right? She was very sick because she had these thoughts and she didn't want to look like, right? And so normal to them was that. Whereas for us, normal meant her, right? That was normal. That was abnormal. So that becomes very subjective. But I think to your point, in the medical world, there are things that are normal. A heart rate is normal or abnormal. And, those sorts of things are fine to say. But I think, what Rod said at the end, right? He said in the world of, and this was in the 1960s, right? He said of plastic surgery and workout gyms and cosmetics, right? It's not so far away that self-improvement, the ability to self-improve or look a certain way, changes normal to, and if you're not this, then you're not normal, right? And that's what Rod's trying to say.
But he
Right.
projected that, okay, let's fast forward to 2000.
Right.
That's what 2000 was supposed to look
Yeah,
like.
yeah,
And I
yeah.
thought, okay.
Yeah,
how interesting.
I do love the future looking in the 1960s. Yes.
I was thinking that was one of the basic differences between the Greeks and the Jews.
Hmm.
In other words, the Greeks were very interested in what they looked like.
Right.
They took baths, they scraped themselves.
Yes,
and
yes, yeah.
Did exercise, Olympics stuff, and
Right.
the Jews were more interested probably in the mind.
Yes, indeed. I think that's fair to say. Yeah. So the last thing I'll add, and I think we have to wrap up. At the bottom of that page where it says when it gives a Shariat Sar, it says the cleanliness of our bodies and surroundings is one of the principal foundations of purity. We're not allowed to say words of prayer or Torah when our bodies are not clean or in a place that is not clean. Not only does physical cleanliness contribute to our general sense of well-being, physical cleanliness is essential for good health. Right? So again, they're looking at it through the lens of Torah. But if we open up that lens a little more, we talk about purity, right? There are certain things, according to the commentators, that are holy, and if we are not taking care of ourselves, we shouldn't engage in these acts, right? Pure and holy and clean and those sorts of things, right? Whereas certain cultures understood cleanliness for to just clean yourself, like you said, in terms of the Greeks or something like that, or even the Muslims who understood disease way before us and that sort of thing. This was, the washing of the hands and the washing of the body. And our Muslim friends do this too. They wash their feet and those sort of things before entering into a spiritual existence, right? Now, to go back to our original discussion, right? It has nothing to do with what you look like, right? It has nothing to do with how rich or poor you are. It has nothing to do with, how smart you are or how wealthy you are or whatever, whatever it is. When you clean yourself in a ritual way, you equalize yourself to prepare to do spiritual work. So once again, Judaism finds those equalizers, right? Is that, and I think the greatest equalizer that Judaism have is in death. You're not allowed to be buried in a big fancy coffin, and you're not allowed to be buried with your stuff, and you're not buried in a suit. You are buried in the tahara, the white bag. Out you go. I mean, that's all it is, in a coffin that is made of wood that disintegrates. You are equal when you come into this world and when you leave this world. And now those are the bookends for Jewish understanding of those sort of things. Obviously, there's chapters and chapters in the Talmud and things like that about pride and
And that
Yeah.
point is very interesting. Jews were clean.
Yeah.
In medieval Spain, they were dirty. They didn't bathe.
Yeah.
They didn't think bathing was a good idea. And the way they reported crypto Jews, where they would clean their linen on Saturday and
Oh, yeah.
bathe. That was a way to find out who the Jews were.
Oh, fascinating. So I think that there's obviously lots more to say on this issue, but from a Jewish point of view, we can take a lot from the dangers that Rod Serling is warning us about, that when ideas of normalcy do not become subjective, the person and the young woman kept saying, they are going to make me do it. They just say they're not going to make me do it. At a certain point, that you push people towards your idea of normalcy, and if they don't come with you, then they are out of the camp, sort of way. And
It's the removal of free will.
right, there is right, exactly.
Free choice and control.
Correct.
So-
Choice and control. Exactly. So that's why it's so important in Judaism that the aspects of control, the 613 commandments are meant to control in Judaism. They're meant to prepare you to do things for the tasks that Jews are particularly tasked to do. Okay. So friends, thank you so much for your
Thank
thoughts
you.
and ideas. And we will see you in March.
Thank you.
You're